We are not licensed medical professionals. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are meant to share our experiences and not to diagnose or as a form of treatment. If you or anyone you know is currently suffering, respectfully encourage them to seek help from a licensed medical professional. The topics discussed in this podcast may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Now Try It With Wine. I'm Des.
And I'm Mary.
And in episode 1, we're talking about our villain origin stories.
I thought it was really cute that you came up with the title. Where did it come from?
I just thought it was funny. I don't know, like, it's trauma-based and...
We're trauma-based? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So we're fucking villains.
I was obviously getting more philosophical with it because I was reading way too into this, but I thought you were trying to be like tongue-in-cheek and say that like how you view yourself, because I personally have never viewed myself as the hero of my story ever. Like, I don't see myself as a person who's going to save me from any of like the crap I get myself into.
Trend-wise, I don't feel like I'm the main character in this storyline.
Yeah, I almost feel like I'm a secondary character to myself.
We're just the extras that people have.
Yeah, I'm watching myself do shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I liked it because for me, I've always identified more easily with the villains than I have the heroes. I think if you have to call yourself a hero, something's gone wrong.
Look, I'm going to be real honest. Some of those villains had... what's the word I'm looking for?
Bomb ass clothes.
Not just that. They had a reason to be mad, and it's okay.
Exactly. That's how I felt about some of the villains growing up. Like, I could understand. I would be angry too.
Look, it's a heated topic between my husband and I, but Thanos.
Oh my God, right? I understand the logic between wanting to help people because we do, like, how do I say this? We are our own worst enemy. We create problems for ourselves that we don't really think about the consequences of when we're talking about population and control and things like that. Granted, he killed people. That's not right.
Yeah, we don't like that. Okay?
We're not saying we're pro-death, but some people aren't playing.
Look, the movie was good, and we're happy that he's dead.
Yeah, but I understood like him wanting change and him just going. He thought that was the right way.
A little extra with it.
Yeah, and he wasn't doing it to be like.
He just didn't want anyone to go hungry.
Yeah, and I can understand that. So I'm kind of like, I'm not saying that I identified with Thanos, and he was like, I'm like, I am Thanos. Like, I'm not gonna say that, but I always felt like, especially with like me looking at my own life, I've always felt like the underdog and not the person who's gonna come out on top.
Okay.
So, like, just to kind of give a perspective on, like, where, like, I think the whole point of this episode is to talk about our background so that you guys know the lens that we're looking at stuff through and what we're bringing to the table as far as, like, our own personal, like, hurts and, like, triumphs and things like that. So, do you want to start first or do you want me to go?
Yeah. Well, I do want to add to Mary and I, this is our safe space.
Yeah, we, worked really hard between us to create a safe space between us. And it wasn't always easy.
Yeah. This is not, I like how Mary said it, this isn't a pissing contest. Yeah. It's just more so to get it out there and maybe this helps somebody else.
And I think that our stories are unique to us, but I don't think they're in themselves unique.
Right. Everyone's different. Everyone has different trauma and has different pain, and you aren't lesser compared to anybody else.
Yeah, and then it's not like what Des said earlier, like what we had talked about before. My pain, it might sound worse to her, or like vice versa. Her pain might sound worse to me than my own. And I think that we're just validating each other. We're not going to turn into like, you can't speak on that because my trauma's worse.
Right.
So we encourage you, if you're going to have these kind of conversations with people in your life after hearing us talk, that you do the same.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, I know. I sounded so intellectual right there.
Oh, my God.
So, Des, do you want to tell us a little bit about, like, who you are and, like, what you think your perspective is, like, about and who you with
you
your
want
vibe?
Me to do it like a,
tell
like
us
a
what
dating?
your vibe is.
I'll do it like a dating. Hi, I'm Des. I'm 24. I'm going to be 25. I don't like long walks on the beach. I
But
like
we
to.
do like pina coladas.
Oh yeah, I like to stay home and play video games. I'm okay. I think my childhood was good. Um, Being the oldest, I did see things differently, and I tell Mary and my husband all the time. I'm really thankful that my parents were open regarding their relationship, because now I think it does help me in my relationship. But I sometimes wish that they weren't so open with a 9-year-old child about the crash.
Yeah.
So that's my perspective. I hope that helps a little bit. Look, this is our first episode. We're getting used to this, okay?
I'll give a little bit of mine, and then you can kind of feed off of it if you like, or chime in when you hear something.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, cool. So I'm Mary. Obviously, you can tell with my voice. If not, re-listen.
So
You'll get there. You'll get there. So I am the oldest in my household. There was 4 of us. I have 2 brothers and a sister. There's a bit of an age gap between all of my siblings. I think the only close age gap is me and Joey, who's my the second oldest child, and we've always been super close. I can honestly say my childhood is kind of like a blur for me, mostly because there was a lot of trauma mixed into it along. I'm not saying that I had this horrible childhood and I like regretted everything and anything like that. It's just, it seemed like there was a lot of pain when I think too hard on it. Like if I were to like superficially look at it, there was a lot of good in it. But if I try to like dissect it, which I feel like everybody's mind goes there when they're struggling, and I don't want to go there right now. But as for me, like there was a lot of trauma, like physical and mental abuse that went on in my household that kind of got brushed under the rug a lot. And I think that that's carried on to my adulthood. So as an adult, I have the tendency to not validate my own feelings. So when I go into these conversations about mental health, a lot of the time I'm trying to validate the other person and at the same
Rather
time
than
myself.
yourself. Yeah.
And so like and because I am the oldest, I'm always going to come with that like authoritarian, like super organized, wanting to do A, B, and C because that's what the instructions say. And just trying to break free of like feeling like I need to fit into a mold.
I don't remember if we talked about it off the podcast or on, but Mary and I were talking about how being the oldest in a Latino household is
Tough.
different.
It's tough.
Unlike Mary, I only had one sister and we're 3 years apart. But for the most part, Allie, my sister, and I were very close. But I still had younger cousins that I had to take care of. And I wouldn't say take care of, it's just more so if we were at a party, they were thrown at us. So we had to take care of them so everybody else could have fun. Now older, I don't do that.
For anybody.
Nobody. I think I still take care of the kids when everyone's over because I want to make sure they're okay. But again, I think it's just being the oldest, you have that motherly instinct.
Yeah, definitely the nurturing vibes for women.
Yeah.
And I think any Latino woman that you talk to is going to, if you ask them to be honest with you, would tell you that they were told that was kind of a necessity to be a good wife and a good mother from a very young age, to be nurturing and to be respectful of other people. And it isn't regardless, like if they were respectful to you, it's because they're family.
I didn't even think of it that way, but you're right.
And that's always it comes more obvious to me now as I'm an adult, how when I'm building boundaries because I'm getting my self-esteem up and I'm starting to work on myself. When I start putting up those boundaries, I get a lot of resistance from women within my own family who I thought would have sympathy for me because I've seen the same behaviors that I'm trying to prevent happen to them. But it's almost like it turns into that pissing contest. Like if I start putting up a boundary, they're like, well, I dealt with this for years. Like I put up with this kind of talk or behavior for years and look, I'm fine.
Why can't you?
Yeah. There's very little validation.
I don't know, like at least on my end, I don't think I've put big enough boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. Or the boundaries didn't go far enough.
I think that's what's it. I have a great relationship with my mom's side of the family. My dad's side is kind of iffy. I mean, there are some that I stay in contact with, but I agree with you. I guess I just didn't have a big enough bond for me to even put up boundaries, so I just don't have them.
I think my boundaries too are based around relationships with other people. So I've caught myself, especially more recently now that I'm aware that I have boundaries and to put them up, that the people I'm choosing to put the boundaries on, at least with my mom's side, are people who my mom is close to, not necessarily me. I think when I really think about the quality of relationships I have on my mom's side, I feel like a lot of them are very superficial. I don't really think they know much about me, like on a personal level or about like what I've been through, because I've always felt like, my mother is not to blame for what happened with my dad. Like she did what she could with what she had available. And there's no handbook on how to be married or how to have children. And you're always just trying to figure it out and do the best you can in the moment. I hold the people who did the things to me accountable for what they did.
Right.
And I think that because there was however, this cloak of secrecy with things. Like these are family matters. You don't talk about them with everybody. So I feel like people, because I respected that so much, I didn't always respect it. Sometimes I told people, but for the most part, the bigger stuff I respected that with. And so they don't see where I'm coming from on certain things. They're confused by me, if that makes sense. Because to me, like when they talk about me, they're always like, Mary's so energetic and she's a nurturing person and she's, easy to talk to, makes friends with everybody. She has this great life. Especially when I came out with my mental health struggles for the first time, I heard a lot of comments about, well, you're married, you have a house, you have a good job. What do you have to be sad about?
It doesn't have to be just that stuff. Just because I'm putting quotations up, have everything doesn't mean you have everything. It's not just the house, the car, I don't know, the new bed. It could be something you just never had that you want and you can never obtain it.
And I think what I didn't have that I wanted was better relationships with people, more honest communication with people, more openness to be myself. I feel like because we are the older sisters, we cannot act like any which way we want in front of our siblings, and it's seen as being disrespectful. Like my sister Gabby gets away with so much compared to what I do.
Oh my God. I talk about this all the time with my parents because I always say like my mom puts my sister's clothes up for her, and when I was living there I had to do my laundry, fold my own clothes, and put it up myself. I love my sister and she knows she's spoiled, but like
I get the same thing from my sister Gabby. My mom takes her to school every morning and she's in high school, and I'm like, I was grounded if I missed the bus. Like, and you're taking her to school.
I'll give my sister the benefit of the doubt because her senior year, they just stopped a bus route to her. So it was either she walks a mile on like a terribly busy road, or I take her to school in hopes to God that I'm not late for work.
Yeah. But it's kind of like the responsibility of doing that fell on you.
Yeah.
To accommodate her. And I feel like as the oldest, we do have to make a lot of accommodations. And I think that plays a lot into our perspective, at least the way I perceived things as I got older from people outside of my family, that I should be more accommodating. Like I don't want to be the problem.
I think it's also too, like, we just want to please everybody. We're a people pleaser. I guess like being the oldest, we have to be the golden child, even though we were the guinea pig.
Yeah, exactly. We were the ones who didn't have the instruction manual. Like our next center, like I feel like parents get better over time. So again, like I don't want to like say that my mother or my father ruined everything or anything like that.
Exactly. We love y'all, okay?
Okay, half that statement is right for me.
I love my mom and dad.
I love both of my parents. It's just learning how to be my own person as an adult and still showing respect to my mother and what she wants of me. Mm-hmm. Because I do want to be respectful of, she doesn't want things for me that are bad. Like she wants things that she thinks will bring me joy. And I want to be respectful of that. But at the same time, no, I love my mom, period. There's no but about my mother. But with my father, it's a little more different because most of the trauma was centered around him. Mm. So my perspective, I tend to be a lot harder on the women because of it. It's weird for me. Like when I see a relationship that isn't going right, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm looking at the woman asking, what are you doing?
You see, for the viewers, that's Latino.
That's how we Latinas think. I don't think I'm the only person only woman that I know who's Latina that does that.
No, I agree. I have some friends that will tell me like they accommodate themselves for their husbands, and it's not even like bad. It's just like a nice thing. Like, oh, I make them breakfast in the morning. I'm like, why would you get up so early to do that when you have to go to work too?
Yep, it's exactly like where I come from when I bring in my perspective. And I don't think my mother was very like independent. She didn't do a lot of like that cooking breakfast stuff. She's gotten better about it now, but at least when I was growing up, she did cook the dinners and stuff, but it was never like something that brought her joy. It was something that needed to get done. It wasn't like something she didn't enjoy being a homemaker. From what I saw, that could be totally wrong, and I misinterpreted what I saw.
But this is
Our
again
perspective.
based on her perspective.
I think my mom she wanted to go to school. She wanted to do something business like career for herself, but because of the path she chose, marrying my dad, having us so young, she didn't get to do those things.
Yeah.
In like the right time frame, I guess.
At least from my perspective, my parents had me really young. I really don't want to get into it because that's not my story.
Yeah.
And I don't know if my parents are comfortable with talking about it. But they were young when they had me, and my mom was still going to school to become a nurse. So by the time I was born, she was still going to school, and she finally got a job, but it wasn't the best. So my perspective is I had two working parents. So when they came home, it was those easy food options.
Yeah. My mom, my sister called it our poor people meal is fideo. And arroz con pollo. She's like, if we're eating either one of those, shit's hard right now.
Oh my god. Mine was hamburger helper. I'm like trying to think.
Well, Robert's is spaghetti, and it's my favorite food on the entire planet.
You know what? His spaghetti. Oh, Robert's her husband. His spaghetti is my rotisserie chicken.
Oh, yeah,
my dad loves rotisserie chicken, and I hate it with a passion because that's all we ate. It's cheap. Like, it's like, I don't know. At the time, it was like $5 for a whole chicken, and then you could just cut that up for like 3 or 4 days. Yeah, I would buy into it, but eating it every day for like 3 months, no thank you.
I get what you mean. I think because our culture, like, you see similar stories. That's what I meant. Like, our stories, like our background. I came from a one-parent household. My dad left when I was about 6 or 7. He came back intermittently. My mom did remarry, but for the majority of my childhood, I would classify it as being a single mother scenario. She was the only one who was really parenting us or taking the role of being a parent.
Yeah.
And for that, like, I will always respect her. Her opinion will always matter. But when I think about how it affects my personal perspective, I'm getting to a point because of my therapy journey where I'm learning to filter even her a little bit.
But I think it's good. Again, it's putting up those boundaries, like you said. I know like how you said it, your parents want the best for you, but sometimes how they say it isn't the best way. Yeah. So it's better to like step back and tell them, no, I don't like how you said that, or let's talk about this rather than you telling me something like that.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard in our culture to do things like that because it's seen immediately as being disrespectful when that's never my intention.
Right,
to be
respect
disrespectful.
Your elders.
Yeah, I never want to be disrespectful to her or anybody. But I've also learned that it doesn't matter who that other person is and what they've done for you. Your boundaries still matter.
Right, you're still your own person, and your feelings still matter. I think that's what I wish I knew when I was younger.
Me too.
I mean, it's better now, at least for my parents. I can talk to them, obviously not how I would talk to my friends, but it's more so like I can have these conversations and tell my parents, like, I didn't like how you said that, or no, that's not what I meant, rather than when I was younger saying something and just getting in trouble for it.
Yeah, and I'm just starting to do that with my mom. My mom is getting really good. I don't know if this is just happening organically or if she's somehow become aware of it, but she's getting really good at recognizing when she's overreacting. At least with me. I don't know how it's going with my other siblings, but I've noticed sometimes where she gets really worked up because we're having a conversation about something that's a little tense, and she'll catch herself and she's like, "No, I'm not meaning to yell at you. Let me back this up a minute." And she's doing the work, and I don't necessarily. And then I also always appreciated with my mom that I don't have to. I can do other things than having to tell her, I see you. Like, I see you doing the work. Like, I can be nice to her in other ways. And she does the same thing for me. Because I think it's hard for us to admit something is wrong.
I think, too, that comes in our culture
Yeah.
too. Rather than saying something's wrong, do something nice in return.
Mm-hmm. And
like, instead of bringing up the conversation, like, what's wrong? Like, our families would be like, hey, I brought pizza
yeah.
to make you happy.
And as a child, I don't think I understood that nuance. Like, I only saw the bad, and I didn't see all the things she was doing to make up for it.
Right.
And that gave me a really bad perspective of her when things got really heated between us. I wasn't being fair because I wasn't acknowledging all the good that was going on at the same time because I was letting myself get wrapped up in the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think our culture as Latinos, we have to encourage our children to shift away from just because they're your aunt, your grandmother, your cousin, they can talk to you and treat you any kind of way. And that you have to put up with it, and that you setting boundaries isn't appropriate.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I lost my train of thought.
We can just take a beat. How has marriage changed your perspective?
Like, what do you mean?
Like when you're thinking of your mental health, has marriage affected you at all? I know you just got married, so it's like kind of new with the honeymoon phase.
I'm like newlywed. Don't say it's a honeymoon. We've been together for like 7 years.
I know, but like there's always like the joy of a wedding brings like a special feeling of like.
I was stressed.
And then from the wedding day forward, because I agree with you. Before the wedding, there's a lot of expectations.
Yes.
With families.
Yes.
About being respectful to people who weren't exactly respectful to you and honoring them still at your wedding in some form. So I get that part of it. But like after the ceremony, I feel like there was like a jubilance period for me and Robert afterwards where our relationship was really rock solid for like maybe until I got pregnant with my son.
I think, honestly, Andrew does help me a lot. I don't know if I said Andrew's my husband. That's him. I think he helps me a lot. My thing, I know we've talked about this before together. I feel like I have my dad's temperament, and when my dad's angry, sometimes he says things that he would never say and doesn't mean. It's just more so like the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
So I feel like I do that too. So rather than continuing, I just shut off and just go to a different room, or I just ignore him. Rather, on his side, he likes to sit down and talk about it, but I'm not ready to talk about it. And another thing is, when I'm ready to talk about it, it's like 2 weeks after. So what's the point of talking about it?
Yeah.
Obviously, I think I've gotten better, but he's very patient. So that's
you have
helpful.
to be married to a Latina. Every man has to be patient to be married to a Latina.
We're la toxicas.
Super toxic. And I get what you mean as far as like the temperament, because I feel like I have my mix of my parents' temperament, and like where I can be irrational and crazy, and then it turns on like a switch, and then it's gone like a switch. Like I can't hold on to anger. And it's really difficult for me sometimes when I've been hurt by something and I want to give it its due, but my mind won't let me hold it. Like,
yeah.
And I feel like I part of the issue is that I do the same thing you do. To avoid saying something I don't mean, I take a step back, but I think I wait too long and I've moved on from it before I address it with somebody. And I think that definitely is a cultural thing, because I've seen other family members do it, where like years later they'll throw something in someone else's face that I was like, oh my God, where did that come from? And because they never addressed it. And I feel like that's something that I have to be more cognizant of now that I'm married, more so than any other point in my life.
Do you think it's like you just like bottle up everything?
In the beginning, it was definitely
there's like that breaking point, and you just bring out everything.
into like what I was like, I totally agree with you because I felt like that when I was pregnant.
Mm.
So just for everybody's like background story about my pregnancy, I had gotten pregnant in 2017 after battling with infertility for a really long time with my husband. We ended up losing our son about 6 months into our pregnancy. It was a very difficult period for me, and it definitely changed the way I see the world for the rest of my life. Like, you don't go like something. I thought that my childhood was traumatic. That was nothing. Like, I could do that shit again in a heartbeat. But losing a child is like, it's earth shattering. It changes everything about you. And I think I've become softer in my view of women in particularly because of it. Because now I understand what pregnancy does to somebody, and having those hormones running through you and having your own child, and like that shift in me as a person definitely changed. And I think I've had a lot more sympathy for my mom because of it. Not that she ever lost a child that I'm aware of, because that's not, we're Mexicans. We don't talk about personal stuff like that with our children. So I'm not aware if she went anything similar like what I was going through, but it definitely showed me that I could rely on her and that she could understand what I was going through, even if she necessarily hadn't gone through it during that period. So I think that definitely changed. It softened me towards women, at least a little bit.
I mean, she's not saying that like she hated women or anything.
No. But I don't think me and Des were talking about earlier, when I would see a relationship, I'm like, I see it as, you're the matriarch, you should be in charge. Why aren't you fixing this?
Exactly.
And I realized that it's so much more complicated than what I thought it was when I was just like a single married woman and we didn't have this kind of infant connecting us. And then the traumatic experience of losing him showing me that, you know, life is like, you always think those things will never happen to you. And then when they do, it's almost like you have to retrain the way you were thinking because you have to accept this because this is the new normal.
I also want to add too, you weren't the only one in our family that like had lost a baby, you know? Yeah. The only thing is, like you said, nobody talks about it. So you were going through this thinking that you were the only one. No one understood you, and why wouldn't you think that? Again, nobody talks about it. And the same thing in general, miscarriages are super quiet. Like, I guess it's because we're women and we're supposed to have babies.
What is it? Suffer in silence beautifully.
Yeah. Rather than speaking about it to help somebody else.
And I had a lot of people, when he passed away and Robert and I decided to have a funeral for him, I had a lot of people questioning why. Like, to them, I think to a certain extent he wasn't real because he never took a breath, because he passed away, unfortunately, before I gave birth. And I was getting that reception to a lot of people because I don't think people understood what he, like, at 6 months, he was a full-formed baby. He had 10 fingers, 10 toes. He had skin. You were at the funeral. I don't think people understood how far along I was when this happened.
He was a cutie patootie.
I know, he looked like his daddy. But I think that because women have suffered in silence for so long, I don't think miscarriages are given the due and the respect and being honored appropriately. I remember when, after he had passed and we were talking, the nurse came in to talk to us. This was like the day after because obviously there was other complications going on at the time. So I had to stay in the hospital overnight. And they wanted to cremate him, and they wanted to do it in an unmarked grave. So,
oh my God, I didn't know that.
The options that she gave us were for us to take him ourselves and go to our own funeral home, but she kind of glazed over that option. Like, she didn't really give us a lot of detail about it. What she was really pushing for us to do was to sign over release of his remains so that they could cremate him with a bunch of other babies and then bury them in a mass grave.
I didn't know they did that.
I didn't know either. Like, no one ever had mentioned anything like that to me before. And it sounded appalling to me.
It does. It's kind of like, what is that? Shoving it under the rug.
Yeah. And my friend who had the same thing happen to her, but a little earlier, a lot earlier in the pregnancy, that they didn't even give her the option to take the baby with her. But it was very new. It was like maybe 2 months in. So when we and Robert were like, I was appalled by it. I didn't even consider the mass cremation and that kind of thing. I didn't even consider it. And then when the nurse came back after we told her that we were going to use a funeral home and we were going to take him out of the hospital, she kept bringing up the mass funeral thing, like I think 2 more times. And I remember it sticking out to me because I was like, I felt like it was being so insensitive to kind of like, we'd already made a decision. Why do you keep bringing this up? But I think it's because even as medical professionals, they're becoming desensitized to it because they see it more frequently than what I think than we know. And so that was definitely surprising to me that was even a thing, because I think that as women, we need to honor this life-changing moment regardless of how it turned out. And I'm so happy that we had the money and the funds to do it right, and in my opinion, do it right, where we had him being doing I can't even remember what the baptism. I was like, the word. I'm a Catholic. Where's the word? Where's the word?
I'm sorry. I'm Christian.
Well, I was raised Roman Catholic. So, and Robert's mom, I don't really know. I know she's Christian, but I'm not sure what denomination or what church she would say she was a patron of. But I remember telling her, because at first we were going to have his ashes cremated and then moved to my church to do the service, like the baptism and like a memorial service. And I remember Robert's mom asking me, like coming to me and saying, I don't want you to cremate him before he's been baptized. I think she was afraid that for some reason, like the cremation wouldn't hold if there wasn't a body. I mean, the baptism wouldn't hold if there wasn't a body.
At least on my end, I have heard that if a baby isn't baptized, then they're not going to heaven.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's wrong or that's just...
No, I wanted to have him baptized, but I didn't think it mattered if he was cremated or not.
Yeah.
But
to Robert's mom,
it did matter. And so out of respect, that wasn't easy. Yes, we can do that. Because I did think that the nurse, something that she said to me stuck with me after we lost him and we were getting ready to leave the hospital. She came in the room and she like asked me if she could hug me. And I was like, okay. Like, I don't really want people touching me, but like, I don't know. Like, I think I had this like feeling that she needed it. So I let her hug me. And then like when like she let go, she was like, I want to tell you and Robert, like she didn't say Robert, you and your husband something. And she's like, my son suffered a miscarriage. Him and his wife were angry. Obviously, like that's easy. I was angry. But she was like, to the point where they were feeling excluded from grieving. Like they were made to feel inappropriate for being upset, her and her husband, as the grandparents. And that their pain over what had happened with her own son and her grandson was invalidated. And she was like, I know this is a really hard time for you and your husband and you have to grieve, but be respectful that you're not the only ones grieving this. Like this is going to affect more than just you guys. So I think her saying that to me right before we left the hospital definitely made that conversation with Robert's mom a lot easier for me to be like, of course, let's make that adjustment. Did you remember anything from that time? Because like I said, it's like when you have trauma, it's a blur.
I always say that. Like I'm like, I don't remember much. How much detail should we go in?
I don't know. Did it affect the way you saw anything or your perception of anything?
I'm going to be honest.
You were young.
Yeah. I just got out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say, 2017? So I was either 19 or 20 when it happened. I'm not saying, I'm going to say it, but I'm not saying it any like mean-wise or anything. But I'm so scared to have a kid because of that. And it's not because, it's just more so like, this isn't my first time going to a child's funeral, you know? And it's not my first time going and feeling so close to that person, so grieving with them. I'm just scared myself because I never want to feel that pain. And I'm not saying like that your pain's invalid or anything.
No, I get where you're coming from.
It's just more so like, I saw how much pain you all were in. And on my end, there's nothing I can really do other than comfort you and do what I can on my end. because I've never experienced it, so there's things that I don't understand.
Yeah. And I think that's the same for anybody dealing with or being presented with anyone else's trauma. Like, we can empathize, but we'll never be able to really understand what they're going through. And even now, like, I've had people who since then have lost children, and I have no idea how to comfort them, because I don't think there was anything anyone could have said to me during that time that would have made it better.
Yeah, I understand. But I am thankful, at least in my perspective, when it happened, in my perspective, I feel like people gave you space, but at the time, I feel like you didn't want that space. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and they did after the 2-week initial period. They gave me a lot of space, but in the beginning, it was an onslaught of people because they wanted to be respectful, so they're coming to my house all the time. And I remember Robert was getting mad at me too, because after we had, like, I gave myself like a day and a half to really sit with it. And then after that, I was like, okay, it's going to start getting around the family. I need to go clean the house, get my groceries in order, because people will be coming. And Robert's like, you don't need to do that. People will bring their own things. Like, you don't, like, we'll just get the house straightened up. And I was like, no, I need to do something. Like, I don't want to get lost in this moment.
And again, that's coming from being a girl.
Mm-hmm.
You always have to be presentable. Your house has to be presentable. You never know who's going to be coming over.
And I'm kind of glad that I did have that, because people were coming like crazy. Every day we had 2 or 3 visitors at least for the first 2 weeks. My mom was bringing food over every night. And every night that she was coming, people were coming with her. So it was definitely but in general, like, getting back to like the main point of it, trauma doesn't just affect the person that's happening to, it affects everybody around you. And I think that that's another thing we need to be cognizant of as we're talking about the different nuances of dealing with trauma, because our culture has a real issue with accepting people's trauma, honoring that trauma, and helping them move on. Because I do think, like what I said, I had people coming up to me telling me, why are you having a funeral? Why are you making a big deal of this? Like, it's inappropriate.
He didn't breathe.
Basically.
He's not a real thing. I remember hearing that.
And I think that as our culture as a whole, we need to be more respectful of that. And I'm hoping that we can bring that into our conversations going forward about real issues that we're dealing with today. Because the whole point of this part of the podcast is just to help you guys know where we're coming from at this point, like what got us to this point. And I think that's the last major thing that happened to me. And I know your wedding was the last major thing that happened to you. So I think now we should move on to talking about because right now my biggest issue after everything that's happened has been my relationships with other people and how to build those boundaries that I've learned I've needed through all of that. So in future episodes of our podcast, I'm hoping that Des and I both can talk about how all the trauma that's happened in the past has shown me that we need better boundaries, not just for me as a person, but culturally, we need better boundaries with each other and being able to respect each other's trauma without invalidating another person's trauma at the same time.
So in episode 2, we're going to talk about boundaries and using Mary's wisdom of counseling.
My little therapy notes. And thank you for listening with us. My name's Mary.
And I'm Des, and thank you so much.
Listen to us again next week.
Peace out, homies.
For what?